Moving on from ionic compounds, we now look at another type of compound called covalent compounds. The difference between these and ionic compounds, and there are a number of them, but the main ones we'll focus on is that these covalent compounds only focus on the non-metal section of the periodic table, so it's a fair bit easier finding information for them since we don't have to search all over the entire thing, just the non-metal section. They also use a different naming system than ionic compounds, one that I typically find a fair bit easier than the ionic compound ones. These ones use prefixes in their names. Prefix is a word that comes before another word. And these prefixes are used to show the number of elements in the compound. If you're not sure what I'm talking about right now, don't worry. I'm going to go over a few examples of these covalent compounds. The first type of question we'll look at is naming covalent compounds after being given their chemical formula. Here you'll see two examples of covalent compounds. Let's focus on this first one, N2O5, nitrogen and oxygen. So for writing the name, the first thing that we're going to do is write down the actual element names. Nitrogen and oxygen. Covalent compound names will follow the same rule for ionic compounds, where we have to modify the end of the name to IDE. So oxygen turns into oxide. And that was the O there. Now the second part is putting prefixes in front of each of these elements. On the right side, I have a list of all the prefixes. We have to find the word associated with the number of that element. So first off, we can see that there are two nitrogens in this compound here. And the word for two is di. The word or prefix for two is di. So I will have to put that prefix right in front of the word nitrogen. So now it reads dinitrogen. And as for oxygen, there are 5 oxygen atoms in this compound. So we find the word associated with 5, penta, and that's what we'll put in front of here. So the final answer for this is dinitrogen pentoxide. On the next example, we have P4O10, 4 phosphoruses and 10 oxygens. So I'll write down phosphorus, and then afterwards, oxide for the P and the O, the phosphorus and the oxygen there. Then for the numbers, we've got 4 and 10. The word for 4 is tetra, and the word for 10 is deca. So we've got tetraphosphorus decoxide. A couple more examples. CO, carbon and oxide. I've been using oxygen a lot in this. I'll have a different one in the next example. Carbon and oxide. There's only one of each of those, and the prefix for that is mono. So I will write down mono, carbon, monoxide. Now here comes another little random rule of chemistry. On the first element, if there's only a single one of those, we don't actually write the mono in there. It only appears on the second element. That's the only time that rule applies. So I'll just note right here, never on first element. And this is our final answer right here, carbon monoxide. Next example, chlorine and fluoride. Chlorine and fluoride, previously known as fluorine. We have one of the chlorines, and normally we would put mono in front of it, but again, there's that random weird rule where we never put mono on the first element. And then fluoride has 3 of them, so we put the word tri. And that's how you write covalent compound names. Now questions where we do the reverse. We have the names and we want to write the chemical formulas. The first thing I'll do is identify the prefixes that are used on both elements there, di and mono. So that means there's going to be 2 of the first one. We've got 2 for di, and 1 of the second element, mono. Next, I'll identify the elements we're going to use. On the first one, we've got hydrogen. On the second one, we've got oxide or oxygen. So writing out the formula, I know we have hydrogen and I know we have oxygen. And then I'll put the numbers in. Hydrogen has 2, oxide has 1. And again, normally we don't write ones in the formula. So the final answer for this is H2O, more commonly known as water. And the next question, we have the prefixes di and hept. And the elements are chlorine and oxide, also known as oxygen. So I know we have chlorine and oxygen. And for the prefixes, di means 2, so there's 2 chlorines. And hept is 7, so there are 7 oxygens. 2 final examples. Sulfur hexabromide. We've got sulfur and bromide, also known as bromine, S and Br. And as for the numbers, since there is no number in front of sulfur, that means there's just one of them. That's one of the cases where mono would have been written, but again, random rule says that mono does not appear on the first one. And then hexa is attached to the bromide, which means 6. So 1 sulfur and 6 bromides. And the final example, triphosphorus decasulfide. Tri and deca are our prefixes, and we have phosphorus and sulfide for our elements. So phosphorus P, sulfide S, and then for our numbers, triphosphorus means there's 3 phosphoruses, and decasulfide means there's 10 sulfides. Again, noting on the reference over here, those numbers.